friendly fire appears to be all too common in Gaza. The IDF says about 20% of Israeli soldiers killed during this war so far have died at the hands of their own military, just like those 3 hostages who had taken off their shirts, were waving white flags, and were desperately trying to escape to freedom. So is this a bigger problem with the Israeli military? Retired Lieutenant Colonel Daniel Davis joins us now. He also co-hosts the Daniel Davis Deep Dive Show on YouTube. Colonel, first of all, the new details today about the hostages, I want you to weigh in on that they had escaped Hamas and been on the run for 5 days, and that their deaths were actually videotaped by a camera on an IDF K9 unit. This is sure to add to the anguish and the fury of some of the families who've been protesting.
Well, it does. And I just anguish is the right word. I mean, I'm not a Jew, and I'm not in Israel, and certainly none of my family members. And I'm deeply affected by that, because you can put yourself in their shoes. You can think, man, they escaped from captivity. They somehow got out. They were so close. They took every precaution that you needed to, and they still ended up getting killed. And I can only imagine the anguish of the direct family members of those. But, you know, I think, Elizabeth, this really underscores that there's a problem with Israeli rules of engagement, because these kinds of things are preventable. And on the other issues you talk about where they're killing each other, the friendly fire incidents also give indication that there is too much freedom for the troops in that combat area to shoot anything that moves. And I think that this is something they're going to have to address if they want to avoid any negative implications outside, you know, with their own people and internationally.
Yeah, 20% of casualties from friendly fire seems incredibly high. I mean, how does that compare to what friendly fire deaths were for the United States military in Iraq or Afghanistan?
Yeah, that is significantly lower. I mean, a fraction of tiny percentages, because I can tell you from my own combat experience, that was something that was very high on our list of training. We took a lot of precaution to make sure you had positive identification. You don't engage unless you're absolutely certain it's the enemy. And, you know, that way that you don't run into these kind of cases where you're not sure who you're shooting at. And that's the bottom line. It's black and white clear. They're shooting at things they don't know about, or they have bad coordination measures. So like if one group of Israeli soldiers are here and they're firing in this action and they didn't coordinate with their flank unit and they end up shooting into them. Either way, these are training problems that need to be corrected quickly.
Listen, you know better than most how dangerous and high stakes urban combat is, and this is urban combat. They're dealing with booby-trapped tunnels, they're dealing with houses and doors that are booby-trapped, they're dealing with traps that have been set for them, you know, backpacks that are with recorders that have children crying or talking in Hebrew. So we get that it's difficult. This is about as difficult as it gets. But is this 20% friendly fire death rate for the IDF? Is this a matter of training? Is it because there's so many reservists who are fighting in this war who aren't full-time soldiers? Or is this more a leadership thing?
Well, it's probably a combination of all. And without more information, it's really hard to say exactly what was going on, because we don't know the nature of these friendly fire actions. And we don't know, was it coordination measures? Was it because of the ROE? I don't know. But it is definitely a leadership problem, because this is something that is avoidable, can be corrected and controlled and kept to an absolute bare minimum. You're right. Urban warfare is the absolute hands down most difficult, worst kind of combat to get into, because everything is in close quarters and all the things you just mentioned there. So it is very hard to do. It is not impossible, though, to make sure that you coordinate so that you have positive identification of targets and you make sure you have coordination with your flank units so you don't kill your own people.
Yeah, the question is, though, if they were so quick to shoot the 3 Israeli hostages with their shirts stripped off, with their hands in the air, waving a white flag, what might be happening to Palestinians in Gaza?
That's exactly the issue. And the thing about these 3 that were killed, it wasn't like one soldier that did it. It was 2 separate groups,
right,
which further implies that their rules of engagement are very liberal. There have been some reports that Israel, they have their rules of engagement that if they give a leave order to a certain area, once they go in there, they regard everyone as a combatant, which is certainly not true. That's not the reality on the ground. But if they're doing that, then that, I can assure you, they're killing lots of people who are not Hamas.